The difference between a sniper rifle and a crayon is smaller than you might think. Both require a steady hand. Both require absolute focus. And in the end, both are about leaving a mark on a blank canvas. Victoria Hayes stood in the center of the Busy Bees classroom at St. Jude's Preschool, watching 24 distinct chaotic universes collide. The air smelled of wet wool, crushed Cheerios, and the sharp, chemical tang of tempera paint. To anyone else, it was just a Tuesday morning in late October. It was noise. It was mess. But to Victoria, it was a grid. Her eyes, a pale, piercing gray that seemed at odds with her soft cardigan and messy bun, scanned the room. She didn't just look, she swept. Left to right, sector to sector. Sector A. Tommy is eating paste near the radiator. Safe. Sector B. Sarah is crying because her blue paint turned green. Safe. Sector C. The door. Victoria's gaze always lingered a fraction of a second longer on the door. It was locked. The safety glass was reinforced. She had checked the hinges 3 times before the first child arrived. "Miss Vicky?" The voice was small, barely rising above the din. Victoria snapped her attention down. A little boy, Liam, was holding up a piece of construction paper dripping with red and black blobs. "Look," Liam said proudly. "It's a dragon." Victoria crouched down, her knees popping slightly, a reminder of a jump in Kandahar a lifetime ago. She smiled, and the transformation was miraculous. The steel in her eyes melted into warmth. She wasn't Sergeant Hayes, the ghost of the valley, anymore. She was Ms. Vicky, who gave the best hugs and knew how to tie shoes in 3 seconds flat. "That is the fiercest dragon I have ever seen. Liam," she said, her voice a soothing alto. "Is he guarding treasure?" "No." Liam shook his head solemnly. "He's guarding his mommy." Victoria's smile froze for a microsecond. A cold shiver, unrelated to the drafty window, walked up her spine. She placed a hand on Liam's shoulder. "That's a good dragon." She stood up and checked the clock. 11:58 a.m. 2 minutes until pickup. Her heartbeat, usually a slow, rhythmic thump of 50 beats per minute, ticked up to 55. Not because of stress, but because of anticipation. In 2 minutes, the side door would open, and the other class would spill out. And among them would be the only thing on this earth that tethered Victoria Hayes to sanity. "Claire." Victoria walked to the window. Outside, the Virginia autumn was dying in a blaze of burnt orange and rotting leaves. The rain was beginning to fall, turning the asphalt of the playground into a black mirror. A silver sedan drove slowly past the chain-link fence. Victoria's pupils dilated. She tracked the car. Make: Honda Accord. Model: 2018. Driver: obscured by rain glare. Speed: 15 miles per hour. Too slow for traffic, just right for reconnaissance. She held her breath. The car kept moving, turning the corner and disappearing. Paranoia, she told herself. It's just paranoia. You've been out for 5 years. The file is closed. The ghosts are dead. But the scar on her left shoulder, a jagged ridge of raised flesh hidden beneath her sweater, began to itch. It always itched before the rain. Or before the blood. The bell rang. The chaos of the classroom shifted frequency as parents began to buzz at the security gate. Victoria went through the motions, matching kids to parents, smiling, exchanging pleasantries about nap times and snack allergies. But her internal radar was tuned to a specific frequency. Then she saw her. Claire Hayes, 5 years old, with hair the color of spun gold and missing her 2 front teeth, came bounding down the hallway. She was wearing a yellow raincoat and boots that were slightly too big, making her look like a little duckling trying to take flight. "Mommy." The impact of Claire hitting Victoria's legs was the best feeling in the world. It was better than any medal. Better than the adrenaline of a successful extract. Victoria scooped her daughter up, burying her face in the smell of strawberry shampoo and rain. "Hey, Bug," Victoria whispered, squeezing her tight. "Did you conquer the playground today?" "I swung the highest," Claire announced, her eyes, blue, just like her father's had been, sparkling. "I almost kicked the clouds." "Almost isn't good enough for a Hayes," Victoria teased gently, setting her down. "Tomorrow, we kick the sun." "Okay, can we get ice cream? Please? It's raining, so nobody else will be there." Victoria laughed. It was their tradition. Ice cream in the rain. It was their way of saying the world couldn't dictate their happiness. "Grab your bag, Bug, let's move out." They walked out of the school hand in hand. The rain had picked up. A cold drizzle that soaked through clothes instantly. Victoria popped open a large black umbrella, shielding Claire, as they walked toward their beat-up Subaru Forester parked in the back lot. Victoria automatically scanned the perimeter. Rooftops, clear. Parked cars, empty. The alleyway behind the dumpster. Shadows. But still. She unlocked the car, ushering Claire into the booster seat in the back. She buckled the child in, her fingers nimble and strong. "Mommy?" Claire asked, looking at the window. "Yeah, baby? Why is that man watching us?" The world stopped. Victoria didn't gasp. She didn't freeze. Her body went into a state of hyperfluidity. The Ms. Vicky persona evaporated instantly, leaving only the soldier. "Which man, Claire?" Victoria asked, her tone conversational, calm, while her right hand drifted imperceptibly toward the pocket of her door where a heavy steel flashlight, her only weapon, sat. "The one by the tree. With the umbrella." Victoria closed the rear door gently. She walked around to the driver's side, keeping her body between the tree line and the glass where Claire sat. She glanced toward the large oak tree at the edge of the lot, using the reflection in the side mirror to look without turning her head. There was a figure, a man in a dark trench coat, holding a black umbrella. He was standing perfectly still, like a statue carved from the storm. He wasn't looking at the school. He was looking directly at her car. Victoria got into the driver's seat and locked the doors. Click. The sound was final. "Is he a friend of yours, Mommy?" Claire asked innocently. Victoria started the engine. "No, sweetie. Just someone waiting for a ride." She put the car in reverse, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. The man hadn't moved, but as she swung the car around to exit the lot, he did something that made Victoria's blood run cold. He raised his hand and tapped his wrist, as if checking a watch. Tick-tock. Victoria didn't speed. Speed attracted attention. She drove exactly at the limit, weaving through the suburban streets of Arlington. Her mind was racing, accessing files she hadn't opened in half a decade. Who is he? Syndicate 7? Disbanded in 2021. The Bratva cell in Kiev? They think I died in the explosion. Unless someone had dug up the grave of the ghost. "Mommy, you missed the turn for the ice cream shop," Claire said, her voice tinged with disappointment. "Change of plans, Bug," Victoria said, her eyes glued to the rearview mirror. A black SUV had turned onto the street 3 cars back. It had been there for 2 miles. "We're going to play the quiet game. Remember how we practiced?" Claire nodded immediately. Victoria had trained her daughter under the guise of games. The quiet game meant hide on the floorboard and don't make a sound until I say so. "Go," Victoria commanded softly. Claire unbuckled and slipped down behind the front seats, covering herself with her blanket. She was so small, so fragile. Victoria took a sharp right, then an immediate left, cutting through a residential alleyway. The black SUV mirrored the move. "Hostile," confirmed. Victoria's grip on the steering wheel tightened until her knuckles were white. She wasn't a teacher anymore. She wasn't a suburban mom. She was a hunter who had been cornered in her own den. She reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a prepaid burner phone she kept charged for emergencies. She dialed a number that didn't exist in any phone book. It rang once, twice. "Speak," a distorted voice answered. "Code Black. Sparrow is in the nest. I have a tail. Sector 4. "Victoria?" The voice lost its distortion, replaced by the shocked tone of an old man. "My God, we thought you were. They found me. Silas. I don't know how, but they found me." Victoria swerved around a delivery truck, running a red light. The SUV behind her blew through the intersection. Sirens not wailing, but closing the distance. "I need a safe house. Now. The farm is burned. You can't go there," Silas said urgently. "Victoria, listen to me. It's not just a hit squad. It's him." Victoria felt the air leave her lungs. "Who?" "Kruger." The name hit her harder than a bullet. Kruger. The man who had put the scar on her shoulder. The man who had sworn that if she ever missed, he wouldn't. "He knows about the girl." "Victoria," Silas whispered. "He wants Claire." Victoria looked at the rearview mirror. The black SUV was accelerating, ramming the back of her bumper. The jolt sent a shudder through the car. From the floorboard, a tiny whimper escaped. That whimper sealed their fate. Victoria Hayes slammed on the brakes. It was a maneuver they didn't teach in driving school. The SUV, expecting a chase, slammed into the back of her Subaru, crumpling the trunk but locking the two vehicles together for a moment. Victoria unbuckled. She reached under her seat and pulled out a tire iron. It wasn't a rifle. It wasn't a Glock. But in the hands of a woman who could calculate wind velocity and the rotation of the Earth to hit a target a mile away, it was enough. She turned to the back seat. Claire was curled in a ball, eyes wide with terror. "Claire, look at me," Victoria said, her voice commanding, dropping an octave into pure steel. "Cover your ears. Close your eyes. Count to 100. Do not stop counting. Mommy? Count. 1, 2, 3. Claire's shaky voice began. Victoria Hayes opened the car door and stepped out into the rain. The men from the SUV were scrambling out, 3 of them. Tactical gear, silenced pistols, professionals. They expected a terrified schoolteacher. They expected a woman begging for mercy. Victoria adjusted her grip on the tire iron. The rain plastered her hair to her face, revealing the jagged white scar that ran from her ear down her neck. She didn't look like a teacher now. She looked like a storm. She took a step forward, not away. "You boys made a mistake," she whispered to the rain. "You woke me up." As the first man raised his weapon, Victoria moved. She didn't run, she flowed. A blur of violence and maternal rage. The lesson was over. The test had begun. 1, 2, 3. Inside the crumpled Subaru, the counting continued, a small, terrified whisper against the leather seat. Outside, the world was screaming. The rain was coming down in sheets now, turning the suburban street into a blurred watercolor painting of gray and black. Victoria didn't blink. Rain didn't bother her. In the Hindu Kush, she had laid in freezing mud for 48 hours waiting for a target. This was just a shower. The first man, the driver of the black SUV, rounded the hood of her car. He was big, 6'4", tactical vest over a dark hoodie. He held a silenced Sig Sauer P226. Professional. He didn't rush. He raised the weapon, aiming for center mass. He made one mistake. He looked at her eyes. He expected fear. He expected a suburban mom pleading for her life. What he saw was a void. Victoria didn't swing the tire iron like a baseball bat. That was for amateurs. She threw it. With a snap of her wrist, the heavy steel bar spun through the rain. A blur of motion. It didn't hit his head. It smashed into his right wrist with a sickening crunch of bone meeting metal. The gun clattered to the wet asphalt. The man grunted, clutching his shattered arm, his eyes widening in shock. Victoria was already moving. She closed the distance in 2 strides. Before he could reach for a backup weapon, she drove her knee into his solar plexus. Doubling him over, she grabbed the back of his neck and slammed his face into the hood of her car. He went limp. 1 down, 2 to go. 4, 5, 6. Claire counted inside. A bullet sparked off the pavement near Victoria's foot. She dove, rolling behind the cover of the SUV's open door. The second man was firing from behind the trunk of the black vehicle. He was yelling something into a radio. His voice frantic. Target is armed. Repeat. Target is active. She's not. Victoria didn't let him finish. She saw his reflection in the wet side mirror of the SUV. He was shifting his weight, preparing to flank her on the left. She didn't have a gun, but she had the first man's Sig Sauer lying in a puddle 3 feet away. She took a breath. Inhale for 4. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. She slid out from cover. Staying low, her hand scooped up the wet pistol. The grip felt cold, familiar, like shaking hands with an old friend she hated. She didn't hesitate. She didn't aim with one eye closed. She point shot. 2 rounds. Pop pop. The second man dropped, clutching his leg. A non-lethal shot. Victoria wasn't a murderer, she was a soldier. She needed answers. The third man, the driver, stayed inside the SUV. He gunned the engine, trying to reverse, to crush her between the 2 vehicles. Victoria raised the pistol, aiming through the windshield of the reversing SUV. She fired 1 shot, not at the driver, but at the front tire. Bang! The tire blew. The SUV swerved violently, slamming into a parked minivan. The airbag deployed with a dusty explosion, pinning the driver against his seat. Silence returned to the street, save for the hiss of rain and the distant, rising wail of sirens. Victoria stood up. Her chest wasn't heaving. Her hands weren't shaking. She walked over to the second man, the one with the leg wound. He was groaning, trying to crawl toward his weapon. She kicked the gun away and placed her boot on his chest. "Who sent you?" she asked. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. It was the voice of a woman discussing a grocery list, not an interrogation. The man glared up at her, rain mixing with the blood on his face. "You're dead, Hayes. You're already dead." "Kruger," she said. It wasn't a question. The man's eyes flickered. That was all the confirmation she needed. "Tell him," Victoria whispered, leaning down so only he could hear, "that he missed." She heard the sirens getting closer. 2 blocks away, maybe less. She couldn't be here when the police arrived. Questions would lead to ID checks. ID checks would lead to flags in the federal database. And flags would lead Kruger right back to them. She turned and ran back to her car. She threw the pistol into the storm drain. She couldn't be caught with it. She ripped the driver's side door open. The airbag in her car hadn't deployed. The impact had been all in the rear. "Claire?" 99, 100. Claire shouted, uncovering her eyes. She looked up, beaming. "I did it, Mommy. I counted all the way." Victoria forced a smile onto her face. It felt like wearing a mask made of glass. She checked Claire for injuries. No blood. No bruises. Just a scared little girl playing a game. "You did great, Bug. You won the game," Victoria said, her voice shaking for the first time. She put the car in gear. The engine whined, protesting the damage, but it turned over. "Now we play the bonus round." "What's the bonus round?" "We see how fast we can get to the airport." Victoria lied. She slammed on the gas. The Subaru screeched away from the scene, leaving behind 3 broken men and a shattered life. As she drove, weaving through the backstreets to avoid the approaching police cruisers, Victoria looked in the rearview mirror. Her own eyes stared back at her. They looked older than they had 10 minutes ago. The teacher was gone. The mother was terrified. And the soldier? The soldier was just getting started. 2 hours later, they were in a Motel 6 off the interstate, 30 miles south of the city. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon cleaner. The neon sign outside flickered, casting a rhythmic red glow across the cheap bedspread. Claire was asleep, clutching her stuffed rabbit. She was exhausted from the adventure. Victoria sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her burner phone. She had dismantled it, removing the battery and the SIM card. It was trash now. She went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. She looked at her reflection in the dirty mirror. The scar on her shoulder was throbbing. A dull, rhythmic ache. She needed supplies. She needed cash. She needed a weapon that wasn't stolen from a hitman. But mostly, she needed to know why. Why now, after 5 years of silence? She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. It was hidden inside a hollowed-out copy of The Very Hungry Caterpillar. She flipped through the pages. Coordinates. Safe deposit box numbers. Names. She stopped at a page with a single name written in elegant, cursive handwriting. Elias Thorne. He was a ghost broker. A man who sold new lives to people who desperately needed to disappear. He was the one who had turned Sergeant Victoria Hayes into Ms. Vicky the preschool teacher. If Kruger had found her, it meant someone had talked. And Elias was the only one who knew the secret. Victoria walked back into the bedroom. She looked at Claire, sleeping so peacefully, unaware that her mother was a lethal weapon, unaware that monsters were real. Victoria kissed her daughter's forehead. "I promise you," she whispered into the darkness, "I will burn the whole world down before I let them touch you." She went to the window and peered through the blinds. The rain had stopped. The parking lot was empty. But in the distance, a storm was brewing, a different kind of storm. Victoria Hayes grabbed her coat. It was time to go hunting. The sign on the door read Tempus Fugit. Time flies. It was a small, Dusty shop nestled in the cobblestone streets of Georgetown, squeezed between a high-end bakery and a yoga studio. To the average passerby, it was a place to fix a grandfather clock. To Victoria Hayes, it was a bank vault of secrets. Victoria parked the Subaru 3 blocks away, tucked into a dark alley behind a dumpster. The rain had slowed to a mist, coating the city in a slick, dangerous sheen. She turned to the backseat. Claire was awake, her eyes glued to the iPad Victoria had allowed her to use, a rare treat. "Okay, Bug, mission briefing," Victoria said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Claire paused the cartoon. "Are we hiding again?" "We are acting," Victoria corrected. "You are the lookout. You stay in the car. You keep the doors locked. If anyone knocks on the window, you blow the whistle." She handed Claire the silver emergency whistle she kept on her keychain. Claire took it solemnly. "What if it's a police officer?" "Especially if it's a police officer," Victoria said darkly. The police were just men in uniforms. And men could be bought. Kruger had deep pockets. "Okay, Mommy, I'll watch the perimeter." Victoria's heart broke a little at the word perimeter. A 5-year-old shouldn't know that word. "I'll be back in 10 minutes. Count the ticks." Victoria stepped out, pulling her hood up. She moved through the shadows, avoiding street lights, her gait changing from the rushed stride of a mother to the stalking pace of a predator. She reached the shop. The lights were off, but the open sign was flipped to closed. Perfect. Victoria didn't knock. She picked the lock on the back door in 12 seconds. The tumblers clicked into place with a satisfying snap. She slipped inside. The shop smelled of cedar, oil, and old brass. The air was thick with the sound of 1,000 clocks ticking out of sync. Tick-tock, tick-tock, click, whir. It was a cacophony of passing time. Elias Thorne sat at his workbench in the back, illuminated by a single green banker's lamp. He was wearing a jeweler's loupe, working on the delicate innards of a pocket watch. He was 60, balding, with hands that never shook. Until tonight. Victoria stepped out of the shadows. She didn't say a word. She just racked the slide of the stolen Sig Sauer. Cha-chick. The sound cut through the ticking like a knife. Elias didn't jump. He just froze. He slowly placed his tweezers down on the velvet pad. "I was wondering when you'd come," Elias said, his voice raspy. He didn't turn around. "You're late, Victoria." "I hit traffic," she replied coldly. 3 mercenaries in an SUV. They were very rude. Elias sighed, a sound of heavy resignation. He slowly spun his chair around. He looked tired, older than she remembered. "I didn't sell you out," he said, holding his hands up. "Give me one reason not to paint this wall with your brains." "Elias, you're the only one who knew the name, Victoria Hayes. You created her." "I created the name," Elias said, his eyes pleading behind his thick glasses. "But I didn't create the technology." He stood up slowly and walked to a filing cabinet. Victoria tracked him with the gun barrel, her finger tight on the trigger. "Don't," she warned. "Just getting a file. Vicky, relax." He pulled out a manila folder and tossed it onto the workbench. It slid across the wood, stopping inches from her hand. "Open it." Victoria kept the gun trained on him but glanced down. It was a printout of a facial recognition scan. Her face, taken from a grainy ATM camera in Virginia 3 days ago. Next to it was an old military photo of Sergeant Victoria Hayes. Match probability, 99.8%. The new systems, Elias explained. They scrape everything now. ATMs, traffic cameras, doorbell cams. Someone ran a legacy search on the old ghost unit. Your face popped up on a chaotic loop in a convenience store. Victoria felt a chill. It wasn't betrayal. It was an algorithm. Who ran the search? She asked. You know who. Kruger. Kruger is just the hammer. Elias said, leaning forward, the hand swinging the hammer. That's what you should be worried about. Explain. Kruger isn't working alone anymore. He's been contracted. High-level clearance. Someone in the Pentagon wants the loose ends tied up. The Vegas job. They're scrubbing the record. Victoria. And you? You're the biggest stain on the page. Victoria lowered the gun slightly. The Vegas job. The mission that had gone wrong. The mission where she had earned her scar and lost her soul. Who else is left? She asked. Miller? Sanchez? Elias looked down at the floor. Dead. Both of them. Accidents. Last week. Miller had a heart attack. Sanchez fell off a balcony. He looked up, his eyes wet. You're the last one. Victoria. The last witness. The ticking of the clocks seemed to get louder. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Time was running out. So they aren't just coming for me. Victoria realized. They're erasing history. Exactly. Elias reached into his pocket. Victoria flinched, raising the gun again. Easy, easy, Elias said softly. He pulled out a small, silver key. This opens a locker at Union Station. Locker 402. Inside is a drive. It has the names. The people who hired Kruger. The people who signed the order to kill your team. He held it out to her. Why give me this? She asked suspiciously. Why not sell it? Because. Elias smiled sadly. I fix broken things. Victoria. But some things can only be fixed by breaking the people who broke them. You're not a broken watch. You're a time bomb, and I think it's time you went off. Victoria took the key. It felt heavy in her hand. A key to Pandora's box. Suddenly, the bell above the shop door chimed. Ding-ling. It wasn't a customer. It was 11 p.m. Elias's face went pale. He looked at the security monitor under his desk. Back door, he whispered. 2 men. Tactical gear. Victoria cursed. They had tracked her here. Or they had been watching Elias all along. Waiting for him to make contact. Go. Elias hissed. Out the front. I'll distract them. Elias. Go. Save the girl. Victoria didn't argue. Sentimentality got you killed. She holstered the gun, grabbed the key, and ran for the front door. As she burst out into the cool night air, she heard the back door of the shop smash open. She heard shouting, and then, as she sprinted down the alleyway toward her car, she heard 2 muffled shots. Phut, phut. The ticking in the shop had stopped. Elias Thorne was gone. Victoria reached the car, breathless. Claire was still in the back, headphones on, humming a tune from Frozen. Victoria jumped into the driver's seat. She didn't look back at the shop. She didn't cry. She put the key into the ignition and the silver locker key into her pocket. Mommy? Claire took off her headphones. Did you get the milk? Victoria looked at her daughter. The innocence in those eyes was the only thing worth fighting for. No, sweetie, Victoria said, her voice hard as diamond. The store was out of milk. But I got something better. What? A map. Victoria lied. A map to the bad guy's castle. She peeled out of the alley, the tires screeching on the wet pavement. She was the last one left. The last ghost. And if they wanted to erase her, they were going to have to bring a bigger eraser. Next stop, Union Station. Union Station at midnight is not a train station. It is a cathedral of echoes. The vast, barrel-vaulted ceiling, decorated with gold leaf and white marble, loomed over the main hall like the ribcage of a giant beast. At this hour, the frantic energy of commuters had faded, replaced by the slow, shuffling drift of the homeless, the weary travelers, and the ghosts of the city. Victoria Hayes walked through the great hall. She didn't look like a soldier anymore. She looked like a tired mother. Claire was asleep on her shoulder. A dead weight of warm, trusting innocence. Victoria's left arm ached from the strain, the scar under her sweater burning like a brand. But she didn't switch sides. Her right hand had to be free. Her right hand was in her coat pocket, gripping the cold steel of the Sig Sauer. Step, step, echo. Every footfall sounded like a gunshot in the emptiness. She scanned the mezzanine. Upper level. Clear. East Hall. 2 security guards. Bored. Drinking coffee. Clear. The ticket counters. Empty. She moved toward the wall of lockers near the baggage claim. They were old, metallic, and scarred with graffiti. Relics of a time before digital storage. Kept alive for people who didn't want a digital footprint. "Mommy?" Claire stirred, lifting her head. Her voice was groggy, thick with sleep. "Are we at the castle?" "Hush, Bug," Victoria whispered, pressing her cheek against Claire's hair. "We're at the treasure chest. But we have to be very, very quiet. The dragon might be sleeping nearby." Claire's eyes went wide. She nodded against Victoria's neck and went limp, playing her part perfectly. Victoria reached locker 402. It was dented. Someone had tried to pry it open with a screwdriver years ago and failed. Victoria pulled the silver key from her pocket. Her hand trembled, just once. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. She inserted the key. Click. She turned it. The locker door swung open with a groan of rusted hinges. Inside, there was no gold, no money, just a single, black envelope taped to the bottom of the shelf. Victoria grabbed it. It felt light, too light to hold the weight of so many deaths. She ripped it open with her teeth, keeping her eyes scanning the perimeter. Inside was a flash drive. And a photograph. Victoria looked at the photo. Her blood turned to ice. It wasn't a photo of the Vegas job. It wasn't a photo of her old unit. It was a photo of Claire, taken yesterday, at the playground, from a distance. On the back, in red ink, were 3 words. "I see you." Victoria didn't scream. The air left her lungs in a silent rush. This wasn't about the past anymore. This wasn't about cleaning up loose ends. This was personal. Kruger had been watching her before today. Well. The voice didn't come from behind her. It came from everywhere. It rolled through the great hall, amplified by the acoustics of the marble walls. Victoria spun around, shielding Claire with her body. She drew the gun, not caring about the cameras anymore. "Show yourself, Kruger," she screamed. Her voice cracked, echoing up to the gold-leafed ceiling. "Kruger, Kruger, Kruger." A slow clap started. Clap, clap, clap. On the balcony above the West Hall, a figure stepped out of the shadows. He was wearing a gray tailored suit that cost more than Victoria's yearly salary. He had silver hair, a neatly trimmed beard, and eyes that looked like dead sharks. He wasn't holding a gun. He was holding a phone. "You look tired, Victoria," Kruger said, his voice projecting effortlessly. Motherhood has made you soft. You used to check your six. Victoria raised the gun, aiming at the balcony. It was 100 yards. With a pistol, a nearly impossible shot for anyone else. For her? Maybe. Let the girl go, Kruger. Victoria snarled. This is between us. Vegas. The desert. It ends with us. It ends. Kruger smiled. A cold, humorless twisting of lips. When I have the drive. And when the little bug is erased. He pointed a finger at her. Not a threat. A signal. Pating. A bullet sparked off the metal locker next to Victoria's head. Sniper. Victoria didn't think. She dropped. Claire, run, she screamed, shoving her daughter toward the baggage carousel. Get under the belt. Go. Claire scrambled, crying now, crawling under the rubber flaps of the luggage belt. Another shot. Crack. This one tore through the sleeve of Victoria's coat, grazing her arm. Victoria rolled behind a concrete pillar. She scanned the upper levels. The shot had come from the east balcony. A second shooter. She was pinned. Kruger on the west, Sniper on the east. You have nowhere to go. Vicky, Kruger taunted. Give me the drive, and I'll make it quick. For both of you. Victoria looked at the pillar. It was thick concrete. She was safe for the moment. But she couldn't stay here. The police would be here in 3 minutes. Kruger's men would be here in 1. She looked at the fire alarm on the wall 5 feet away. She looked at the sprinkler system piping running along the ceiling. She looked at her gun. 7 bullets left. Claire, Victoria yelled, her voice cutting through the panic. Cover your ears. Close your eyes. Victoria took a breath. She closed her eyes for a second, visualizing the trajectory. She stepped out from the pillar. Crack. The sniper fired, missed by an inch. Victoria fired 3 shots. Bang, bang, bang. She didn't aim at Kruger. She didn't aim at the sniper. She aimed at the main pressure valve of the fire suppression system directly above the sniper's nest. The pipe burst. A jet of high-pressure water exploded outward with the force of a fire hose. Blasting the sniper backward, he slipped on the wet marble, his rifle clattering over the railing as he fell to the floor below with a sickening crunch. Chaos erupted. The fire alarm began to wail, a deafening, strobe-lit shriek. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Sprinklers across the entire station triggered. Water rained down from the ceiling like a monsoon inside the cathedral. Commuters screamed. People ran. The station turned into a stampede of confusion. Victoria sprinted through the artificial rain. She slid under the baggage carousel. Mommy. Claire was curled in a ball. Shivering. Soaked to the bone. Victoria grabbed her, pulling her close. I've got you. I've got you. She looked out. The station was a blur of flashing lights and screaming people. Kruger was gone, vanished into the chaos. He wouldn't risk being caught by the police. He was a ghost, just like her. But he had lost the advantage. Victoria shoved the flash drive into her bra. She picked up Claire, wrapping her coat around the child's head. We have to move. Bug, we're going on a train ride. They blended into the panicked crowd rushing toward the metro tunnels. Down into the dark, down into the belly of the city. As they ran, Victoria felt the warm trickle of blood running down her arm. She didn't care. She had the drive. She had her daughter. And now, she knew the truth. Kruger hadn't just come to kill her. He had come to gloat. And that was his mistake. Because now, Victoria Hayes wasn't just running. She was angry. And an angry mother is the most dangerous thing on God's green earth. The Washington, D.C. metro system doesn't look like a subway. It looks like a fallout shelter designed by a brutalist architect. The stations are massive, vaulted cathedrals of waffle-patterned concrete, repeating endlessly like the ribcage of some prehistoric beast. Victoria Hayes carried Claire down the steepest escalator in the Western Hemisphere. The metal steps slid deeper into the earth, taking them away from the flashing lights of police cruisers and the chaotic wail of sirens above. The air down here was thick. It smelled of ozone, brake dust, and damp wool. "Mommy, I'm cold," Claire whispered, her teeth chattering. Her clothes were soaked from the sprinkler system back at Union Station. "I know, baby, I know," Victoria said, her voice raspy but impossibly calm. "We're catching the magic train. It's warm inside." She set Claire down as they reached the fare gates. Victoria didn't have a SmartTrip card. She scanned the area. No security guard in the booth. She scooped Claire up and vaulted over the turnstile in one fluid motion, ignoring the sharp, tearing pain in her left bicep, where the sniper's bullet had grazed her. Blood was seeping through her coat sleeve, mixing with the rainwater, but Victoria didn't have time for bandages. A red-line train was screeching into the station, its headlights sweeping the dark tunnel like the eyes of a deep-sea predator. "Doors opening," the automated voice announced, flat and indifferent. Victoria slipped through the doors just as they began to cycle. She stumbled into the car, shielding Claire from the sudden lurch of the train. Thump, hiss, the doors slammed shut. The train began to move. Clack clack, whoosh. The car was nearly empty. There was an old man asleep in the far corner, clutching a grocery bag, and a young couple wearing noise-canceling headphones, glued to their phones. No one looked twice at the soaked woman and the shivering child. Victoria guided Claire to a seat. She quickly peeled off her heavy, wet trench coat, revealing a thinner sweater underneath. She draped the heavy coat over Claire like a blanket. "Listen to me, Bug," Victoria said, smoothing the wet hair back from her daughter's forehead. "Close your eyes. Pretend we are at the beach. The sun is shining. The sand is hot. But I'm still freezing," Claire whimpered. Victoria bit her lip. She looked down at her arm. The cut was about 2 inches long, clean, but bleeding freely. She tore a strip of fabric from the hem of her undershirt and wrapped it tight around the wound. She used her teeth to pull the knot secure. The pain cleared her head. The train hurtled through the black tunnel. Outside the windows, lights blurred past like streaks of time. Victoria pulled the flash drive from her bra. It was dry. She gripped it tight. This drive was why her team was dead. It was why Elias was murdered. But something felt wrong. Paranoia is a soldier's best friend. Why did Kruger find them at the school? Why did he find them at Union Station so quickly? Victoria thought back to the photo. "I see you." The photo was taken at the playground yesterday. She looked at her daughter. Claire was wearing her favorite yellow backpack, shaped like a bumblebee. "Claire," Victoria asked gently, keeping her voice low, "this backpack, did anyone put anything in it? Or did you find anything new?" Claire opened one eye, sleepy and confused. "No, just the clown." Victoria's heart skipped a beat. "The clown? At the park yesterday. The funny man making balloon animals. He said he liked my backpack. He gave me a badge." Victoria spun the backpack around. There, pinned to the strap among the cartoon stickers, was a small, yellow smiley face pin. Victoria ripped it off. She flipped it over. A tiny black dot blinked on the back. A military-grade micro-GPS tracker. Son of a bitch, she swore in Russian. An old habit. They didn't need to hack the CCTV cameras. They didn't need satellites. They had tagged her daughter like a migratory bird. Kruger had been playing with them from the start. He wanted her to run. He wanted the chase. The train began to slow down. The intercom crackled. Next stop. Gallery Place, Chinatown. Victoria peered out the window as the station platform came into view. Standing near the edge were 3 men in long coats. They weren't looking at their phones. They were scanning the passing train cars. Kruger's cleanup crew. They were waiting at the next stop. The GPS signal had led them right here. Victoria looked at the blinking smiley face in her hand, then at the train doors preparing to open. "Claire, we have to play the fastest game of hide and seek ever," Victoria said, her eyes hard and focused. "When the doors open, we are not getting off." "We aren't?" The train stopped. Ding dong. Doors opening. The men on the platform started to step onto the train, moving methodically from car to car. Victoria pushed Claire down to the floor, hiding behind the plastic partition of the seats. She tossed the smiley face pin into the open grocery bag of the sleeping old man in the corner. The mercenaries walked past their row. Victoria held her breath, gripping the small folding knife on her keychain, her only weapon left. One of the men paused. He looked at a handheld device. The GPS signal was pinging strong, coming from the corner. "Target is stationary," the man whispered into his radio. He signaled his partner to move toward the sleeping old man. Ding dong. The automated voice returned, doors closing. In that split second, Victoria moved. She didn't attack. She grabbed Claire and sprinted for the closing doors. They slipped through the narrowing gap at the very last second. The rubber seals brushed her back as the doors slammed shut, locking the killers inside with the decoy. The train lurched forward, carrying the assassins, and the fake signal, deep into the dark tunnel. Victoria and Claire stood alone on the Gallery Place platform. "Mommy?" Claire looked up, her big eyes wide with fear. "Game over. Bug." Victoria exhaled, cold sweat drenching her back. "Now, we go see an old friend. A friend I promised I would never see again." She led Claire toward the exit, blending into the crowd of tourists. Victoria knew she couldn't run forever. She needed a weapon, she needed an ally, and most importantly, she needed to know what was on that drive. There was only one man in DC crazy enough and skilled enough to crack it. A hacker who lived underground. Literally. Beneath Washington, D.C., there is more than just subway lines. There are Cold War fallout shelters, forgotten service tunnels, and spaces that do not exist on any tourist map. Victoria guided Claire down a rusted maintenance track behind the Gallery Place station. The darkness here was absolute, broken only by the weak beam of a cell phone flashlight Victoria had borrowed from a drunk tourist upstairs. "Where are we going, Mommy?" Claire asked, her small voice echoing against the damp walls. "To Uncle Gideon's house," Victoria whispered. "Remember, we have to be very quiet. Uncle Gideon doesn't like loud noises." They stopped in front of a heavy steel door, hidden behind a pile of concrete rubble. There was no handle, no keyhole, just an ancient security camera with a cracked lens, staring blindly at them. Victoria didn't knock. She picked up a loose stone and tapped it against a water pipe running along the ceiling. Tap. Tap tap, tap. Morse code. The letter V. 1 second passed. Then 10. The steel door groaned, sliding open with a piercing shriek of metal on metal. Inside, it wasn't a dark cave. It was a universe of light. Dozens of computer monitors were stacked floor to ceiling, creating glowing walls of cascading code, green, red, and blue. The air hummed with the sound of cooling fans, buzzing like a giant, mechanical hive. Sitting in the center of this hive was a man. He was skeletal, his skin pale from years without sunlight. He wore thick, black circular glasses that completely hid his eyes. He was typing at a speed that seemed impossible, even though the monitor directly in front of him was black. Turned off. He didn't need to see the screen. He heard it. A screen reader program was rattling off data at a speed normal human ears would hear only as a high-pitched static. "Victoria," Gideon said. His voice was deep, resonant, and he didn't turn around. "You brought a child. And you're bleeding. The smell of O-negative blood mixed with gunpowder. It's a terrible perfume." "Gideon." Victoria stepped inside, pulling Claire close. "I need a favor." "You always need a favor." Gideon spun his chair around. "Ever since that night in Kandahar when you pulled me out of a burning Humvee. You think you own me?" "I saved your life," Victoria replied flatly. "And in return, I lost my eyes." Gideon pointed to his black glasses. "But fair trade. I see things now that you can't. Give it to me." Victoria blinked. "Give you what?" "The drive you're hiding in your bra. It's emitting a heat signature. I can practically smell the encrypted data from here." Victoria pulled out the flash drive and placed it in Gideon's outstretched hand. He rolled it between his fingers like a jeweler appraising a diamond. "Military-grade encryption. Gen 5 security protocols. This isn't common criminal trash. This is Pentagon hardware." He plugged the drive into a dedicated, isolated port. "Claire," Victoria turned to her daughter. "Go sit in that corner and play with Uncle Gideon's robot toys. Don't touch the wires." Once Claire was safe in the corner, giggling at a small spider robot crawling across the floor, Victoria turned back to the screens. "Open it," she commanded. Gideon scoffed. He began to type. The sound of the mechanical keyboard was like erratic gunfire. "It's booby-trapped," Gideon muttered, his head tilting as he listened to the code. 3 wrong password attempts. And it fries the chip. Then it sends our GPS coordinates to, well, Homeland Security. Can you do it? Don't insult me." 5 minutes passed. The tension in the room was suffocating. Claire played. Victoria gripped her empty gun. Ping. A soft chime echoed. On the largest monitor, windows of data bloomed open. Maps, bank transfers, dossiers. And a name appeared in the center. Project Black Sand. "Dear God," Victoria whispered. "This isn't a hit list." "Victoria." Gideon's voice trembled. "It's a business plan." Victoria leaned in. "Numbers. Locations. Las Vegas 2018, completed. Kiev 2021, completed. Washington, D.C. tomorrow, pending." Vegas wasn't a botched mission. Victoria realized, her voice hollow. "We didn't accidentally fire on civilians. We were the scapegoats. Look at the money." Gideon pointed to a transaction line. $500 million. Transferred to a shell company called Aegis Corp. And the man who owns the shell company. Gideon typed another command. A photo popped up. It wasn't Kruger. It was Senator Sterling. The man currently running for president on a platform of law and order. Sterling hired your team in Vegas to cause that massacre. Gideon analyzed rapidly. He needed a tragedy to pass his bill increasing the budget for private military contractors. Your team was played. You weren't soldiers. You were actors in a bloody play. Victoria felt sick. The guilt, the nightmares, the 5 years of hiding. It was all a lie manufactured by a politician climbing the ladder. Tomorrow. Victoria looked at the final line. What happens tomorrow in D.C.? Gideon zoomed in on the map. He's going to assassinate his rival candidate, Gideon said, his face draining of what little color it had. And he's going to blame it on a disgruntled veteran with PTSD. A crazy woman with a gun. Victoria watched her own face appear on the target screen. He's going to frame me, she whispered. That's why Kruger didn't kill me immediately. He wants to take me alive. Or corner me until I have to shoot. Victoria. Gideon suddenly stopped typing. He tilted his head, listening to something no one else could hear. What? I hear a vibration. The subway? No. Gideon stood up, knocking his chair over. The subway runs on an 8-minute cycle. This is continuous. And it's coming from the ventilation shaft. He reached out and slammed a kill switch on his desk. The room plunged into total darkness. They found us, Gideon whispered in the dark. They aren't using GPS anymore. They're using thermal drones. A loud boom echoed from the steel door. Uncle Gideon, I'm scared, Claire screamed in the dark. Run, Gideon shouted, throwing a heavy bag at Victoria. Take this. Go out the emergency hatch. Sewer line number 4. What about you? I'm blind, but I know this maze better than they do. Gideon pulled a sawed-off shotgun from under his desk. I'm going to teach these drones a lesson about music. The steel door blew inward. Red laser sights swept the smoke-filled room. Victoria grabbed Claire and dove into the black abyss of the sewer tunnel just as the first shot rang out. The explosion shook the ground beneath their feet. It was a dull, muffled thump, deep inside the earth, like the heartbeat of a dying giant. A cloud of dust and smoke belched out of the sewer grate near the tidal basin, scaring a flock of pigeons into the gray morning sky. Victoria didn't look back. She knew what that sound meant. Gideon had triggered his dead man switch. The lair, the servers, the drones, and the blind man himself were gone, buried under tons of concrete and silence. Victoria dragged herself up the muddy bank of the Potomac River, pulling Claire behind her. They were covered in grime, smelling of sulfur and stagnant water. The sun was just rising, casting a blood-red light across the white marble of the Jefferson Memorial. "Mommy, is Uncle Gideon okay?" Claire asked, her voice trembling, clutching the heavy canvas bag Gideon had thrown to them. Victoria stopped. She knelt down and wiped a smear of mud from her daughter's cheek. She couldn't lie. Not anymore. "Uncle Gideon just bought us time." "Bug," Victoria said, her voice cracking. "He bought us the most expensive thing in the world. We can't waste it." She opened the canvas bag. Inside was not a weapon. It was a ruggedized tablet and a headset. And a single, heavy brick of C4 plastic explosive with a remote detonator. Victoria turned on the tablet. Gideon's voice, a pre-recorded message, flashed on the screen. "If you are listening to this, I am offline. The encryption key for the drive is embedded in this tablet. It also has a back door into the secret service frequency for today's event. The target isn't just the rival candidate. It's democracy. Vicky, don't miss. Victoria checked the time. 10 a.m. The Unity Rally at the Lincoln Memorial started at noon. 2 hours. She looked at Claire. This was the end of the line. She could not take a child into a kill box. Claire, Victoria said, her tone shifting to that steel core command voice. Do you remember the field trip rules? Claire nodded, tears welling in her eyes. Stick to the buddy system. Don't talk to strangers. Good. Victoria stood up and pointed toward the Smithsonian Natural History Museum across the mall. We are going to see the dinosaurs. I need you to be the bravest girl in history. 11:30 a.m. The National Mall. The crowd was a sea of red, white, and blue. 50,000 people packed the lawn between the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial. Banners waved, music blared. It was a carnival of patriotism. But to Victoria Hayes, it was a geometry problem. She moved through the crowd, wearing a stolen oversized hoodie and a baseball cap. She had left Claire inside the museum, blending her into a large group of first graders from a local school wearing similar yellow shirts. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, walking away from her daughter. But Claire was safer with 100 witnesses and security guards than she was with Victoria right now. Victoria tapped the earpiece. The Secret Service chatter buzzed in her ear. Sector 4 clear. Sniper Team Alpha in position on the Lincoln roof. Packages inbound. ETA 5 minutes. Senator Sterling was coming. Victoria scanned the environment. If she were Kruger, where would she be? Not the roof, too obvious. Not the crowd, no line of sight. She looked at the construction scaffolding wrapping around the north side of the reflecting pool. It was covered in tarps. A restoration project. Perfect. It offered a cross-fire angle. It was shielded from the police snipers on the memorial. And it had a direct line of sight to the podium. Victoria moved. She didn't run, she flowed with the crowd, cutting laterally toward the construction site. She slipped through a gap in the chain-link fence. The area was deserted, filled with bags of cement and steel rebar. She climbed. First level, second level, third level. The wind picked up, whipping the plastic tarps like sails on a ghost ship. The noise of the crowd below was a distant roar. Like the ocean. She reached the fourth platform. And there he was. Kruger. He was set up like a professional. He had cut a small slit in the tarp. He was lying prone on a yoga mat to stabilize his aim. His weapon was a suppressed Macmillan TAC-50 sniper rifle. A cannon designed to stop trucks. He wasn't aiming at the podium yet. He was checking his windage. Victoria didn't have a sniper rifle. She had a stolen Sig Sauer pistol with 6 bullets. And a brick of C4. She was 50 feet away from him. She stepped onto the platform. A loose bolt rattled under her boot. Kruger didn't flinch. He didn't turn around. "You're loud, Victoria," he said, his voice calm, carried away by the wind. "For a ghost." "I'm not a ghost anymore," Victoria said, raising the pistol. "I'm a mother." Kruger chuckled. He slowly rolled onto his side, keeping one hand near his rifle. "And that makes you weak. You should have kept running. I would have let you go eventually." "Liar." Victoria stepped closer. "You were going to kill the rival candidate. Then kill me. And frame me as the PTSD loner who lost her mind." The perfect narrative for Sterling's campaign. Politics is just storytelling. Vicky, we write the script. The people just buy the tickets. Kruger sat up. He looked at her. He wasn't afraid. "But you're too late. The shot is already dialed in. And look. He pointed down at the crowd. Victoria glanced down. On the large jumbotron screens. The camera panned across the crowd. It zoomed in on a group of children near the front barricade. A group of children in yellow shirts. Claire. Victoria's blood froze. Did you really think? Kruger smiled, pulling a detonator from his pocket. That I wouldn't track the little tracking device you put on that poor commuter? We found the decoy in 5 minutes. We found the girl in 10. Don't you touch her, Victoria hissed, her finger tightening on the trigger. I don't have to. Kruger held up the detonator. I have a team in the crowd. If I don't check in every 60 seconds, she disappears. If you shoot me, she disappears. Victoria hesitated. The pistol wavered. Drop the gun, Vicky, Kruger commanded. Be a good soldier. Watch the history happen. Then, maybe, I let the girl alive. Victoria looked at the gun. She looked at Kruger. She looked at the screen where Claire was smiling, waving a little American flag, completely unaware that she was in the crosshairs of a monster. Victoria Hayes lowered the gun. Kruger grinned. Smart girl. He turned back to his rifle. He adjusted the scope. Senator Sterling is taking the stage. Kruger whispered. Showtime. Victoria stood there, defeated, powerless. Or so he thought. She remembered Gideon's last gift. The C4. She hadn't put it in her bag. She had stuck it to the main support beam of the scaffolding on the first floor when she climbed up. She didn't need to shoot Kruger. She didn't need to fight him. She just needed to bring the house down. Victoria looked at the remote detonator in her left hand, hidden inside her sleeve. Hey, Kruger, she said softly. He glanced back, annoyed. What? You forgot one thing about teachers. What's that? We hate bullies. Victoria pressed the button. A deafening roar, followed by the sound of tearing metal and splashing water. Gravity is a fair judge. It doesn't care if you are a sinner or a saint. It only cares about weight. When Victoria pressed the button, the C4 charge on the main support beam didn't create a fireball. It created a vacuum. The steel leg of the scaffolding sheared off with a screech that sounded like a dying banshee. The entire structure, 4 stories of steel, wood, and tarp, twisted violently to the left. Kruger lost his footing. His rifle, the expensive Macmillan TAC-50, slid off the tilting platform and tumbled into the air. He lunged for the railing, his eyes wide with a primal panic that no amount of money could silence. Victoria didn't lunge. She jumped. She pushed off the collapsing metal, diving backward into the open air. For a second, she was flying. Below her, the reflecting pool was a sheet of dirty glass. She hit the water. Splash. The cold was a shock to the system, but the water broke her fall. Above her, the scaffolding crashed down into the shallow end of the pool with a thunderous boom, sending a tsunami of water and debris spraying over the terrified crowd. Victoria surfaced, gasping for air. Her shoulder, the bad one, was screaming in agony. She dragged herself through the waist-deep water, pushing aside floating pieces of tarp and wood. Sirens were wailing everywhere. The Secret Service was swarming the area, weapons drawn, shouting orders. Victoria looked for Kruger. She saw him. He was draped over a bent steel beam, half submerged. He wasn't moving. The fall hadn't killed him, but the wreckage had pinned him. He was broken. The ghost was finally grounded. Victoria didn't check for a pulse. She didn't have to. The war was over. She reached into her pocket and pulled out Gideon's ruggedized tablet. It was waterproof. The screen was cracked, but it was still glowing. Upload complete. The files, the bank transfers. The emails from Senator Sterling. The kill order for the Vegas job had been broadcast. Not to the news, but directly to the FBI, the CIA, and the private servers of every major news outlet in the country. Within minutes, Senator Sterling's phone would ring. Within an hour, his campaign would be dead. Within a day, he would be in handcuffs. But Victoria didn't care about politics. She cared about one thing. Claire. She scrambled up the slippery concrete edge of the pool. She was a mess, soaked, muddy, bleeding, looking more like a swamp creature than a human being. The crowd was pushing back, terrified of the explosion, but near the museum steps, a group of children in yellow shirts was huddled together, surrounded by teachers and police officers. Victoria ran. Her legs felt like lead. Her lungs burned. "Mommy." The voice cut through the chaos like a beacon. Claire broke away from the line. She ran toward Victoria, ignoring the mud, ignoring the blood. Victoria fell to her knees. Claire collided with her, wrapping her small arms around Victoria's wet neck. "I saw you fall." Claire sobbed into her shoulder. "I saw you fly." Victoria buried her face in her daughter's hair. She smelled of museum dust and fear. But she was alive. She was warm. "I told you." "Bug," Victoria whispered, tears mixing with the pool water on her face. "We were just playing. It was just a big, big splash." A shadow fell over them. Victoria looked up. 3 Secret Service agents stood there. Weapons lowered but ready. One of them, a tall man with gray hair, stepped forward. He looked at the wreckage in the pool, then at the tablet lying on the grass next to Victoria. He looked at her scar. He recognized it. "Ma'am," the agent said, his voice respectful, almost awed. "We received the data package. We know what happened here. We know who you are." Victoria held Claire tighter. "Am I under arrest?" The agent looked at his earpiece, listening to a voice from command. He paused, then looked back at Victoria. "No, Sergeant Hayes," he said softly. "As far as we are concerned, you died 5 years ago. And the person who stopped this assassination attempt was just an anonymous concerned citizen." He motioned for a paramedic. "Get her some blankets. Get the kid some hot chocolate." Victoria exhaled, a breath she felt she had been holding for half a decade. 6 months later. The classroom smelled of lavender and dried paste. It was spring in Oregon. The rain here was different than in D.C., softer, cleaner. "Miss Vicky?" Victoria looked up from her desk. She was wearing a thick wool sweater. The scar on her shoulder was covered, but she could still feel it. It didn't itch anymore. It was just there, a part of the map of her life. "Yes, Liam?" she asked. A new boy, also named Liam, held up a painting. It was a picture of a house with a giant sun and 2 stick figures holding hands. "Is this a castle?" Victoria asked, smiling. Her eyes were bright. The gray steel was gone, replaced by a calm, deep ocean blue. "No," the boy said. "It's a home." The bell rang. Ding ding ding. The door burst open, and parents flooded in, among them, Claire, now 6 years old and missing another tooth, ran in from the hallway where she had been waiting. "Mom, look." Claire held up a report card. "I got a gold star in reading." Victoria picked her up, spinning her around. "That's my girl. That's my smart little bug." They walked out of the school together. Hand in hand. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold. They walked to an old, sturdy pickup truck. In the passenger seat, a man with dark glasses and a cane was waiting. Gideon. He wasn't dead. He was just retired. Like them. How was school? Gideon asked, sensing them approach. Quiet, Victoria said, lifting Claire into the back seat. Just the way we like it. She climbed into the driver's seat. She checked the rearview mirror. No black SUVs. No men in trench coats. Just the empty road behind them. Victoria Hayes started the engine. She didn't check for exits. She didn't scan the perimeter. She just looked at her daughter and smiled. The sniper was gone. The teacher was here to stay. And the scar? It was just a reminder that wounds heal. As long as you have something worth living for.